This MPI is about the government boasting about what they think is success. The motion tries to claim Labor are doing a great job investing in projects and government services for the benefit of families. Well, evidence says otherwise, particularly if you live in regional Victoria. This Labor government has been in power for 11 years. Over this time, 62 taxes have been introduced. Victoria has the most taxes of any state in Australia. Victoria has the most debt, more than New South Wales, South Australia and Tasmania combined. Every project is late and cost overruns are the norm, to the tune at this point of $40 billion of waste, simply because Labor can't manage projects, taking our debt to just the state of Victoria to $194 billion. Now that is $29 million in interest payments alone every single day. Some of these figures are too big for people to even reconcile. To enable this huge debt and to pay the interest bill, the government has introduced more taxes on Victorians with no plan to pay back the debt. So many taxes on housing. In fact, the taxes on houses make up, on new builds, nearly half the cost of a new home. So homeowners can't opt to rent out their properties because they can't afford the tax. Houses are being sold, resulting in less rentals. In a housing crisis, how is this an effective way to govern? The solution to this, from this Allan Labor government, is tax holiday houses. Holiday tax, tourism tax. There's no modelling or economic rationale behind this that can support their determination that this will work. It's just an easy grab and run. So many complaints in my office from hardworking Victorians about the land tax. People who are absolutely shocked at the bills they're getting from this government, who think they can just tax lands and make this the way that they can get revenue. I had an older couple in my office recently in tears. They were battlers. They'd worked in, normal income jobs all their life, and they'd saved up and bought a bush block, and they can't afford the land tax. They were in tears because they have to sell their one luxury in their life, and the government just keeps taking more money out of hardworking families' pockets. This tax on tourism, one of the many taxes, will be repealed by us when we're in government, which will happen on the 26th in November 2026. Tourism in the regions is a huge contributor to the economy, but the government doesn't seem to understand this or even appreciate it. The Commonwealth Games, when we talk about tourism in the regions, was an opportunity supposedly put forward by this government to bring vibrancy and visitors to our great regions. An opportunity to showcase what makes our state extraordinary. But no, they cancelled that. Too hard. And that $580 million they've paid to Scotland to have the Games funded there just grates on every Victorian, particularly regional Victorians' nerves. We were promised infrastructure even to soften the blow of this absolute waste of government's money to send it over to Scotland to fund the Games. We could have the Warrnambool Surf Lifesaving Club, which is literally disintegrating, funded from this, but we haven't seen any of these regional promises that were supposed to come after the cancellation of the Commonwealth Games come to fruition in regional Victoria. The Surf Lifesaving Club is desperate for an upgrade and restoration, and the volunteer organisation that keep both local and tourists safe are completely ignored by the Allan Labor government. All the while, the Allan Labor government keeps spewing money into projects that don't have business cases with no end costing, and higher taxes, in the end, hurt families. But we will repeal taxes, and the 5 we've already announced are the education tax. We will repeal and restore choices for Victorian parents. The emergency services volunteer tax. We will repeal and stop punishing the volunteers who desperately want the government to listen to them, who go out and fight for our safety against fires, and the SES who protect us during storms. And this emergency service volunteer tax, don't be have the wool pulled over your eyes. This will affect every homeowner from border to border into metropolitan Melbourne and every renter along the way. But we will axe that tax. We will completely abolish Labor's regressive health tax. I mean, fancy putting a tax on sick people when we're in a health crisis. We'll reform stamp duty, making it easier for home ownership, bringing affordable housing back for Victorians. That's been the dream, and that's the dream that we'll restore. And of course, as I said, the holiday and tourism tax. We will repeal these taxes, and we've already announced 14 months out these and 27 election policies, which we will reform and abolish taxes and make life easier for Victorians. In South West Coast, I speak to business owners every week who are struggling, not because they lack vision or dedication or capability, but because they're weighed down by government red tape, rising costs and delayed support. And those taxes sit at the base of all those problems. From Warrnambool to Portland, Hayward to Port Fairy, family businesses are making the heartbreaking decisions to scale back, lay off staff or close altogether. Businesses that have closed or are closing in my electorate are there's just a long list, and some of them are the Phillips Monkey Cafe in Koroit Street, Sports Power, Cheap as Chips, in Warrnambool shutting down Sports Power, Routes Shoex, Finks, Cotton On Kids, Just Jeans, Ballistic, Darien Office and Art Supplies, Millers, Godfrey's, Rivers, Katie's. There's an enormous amount, isn't there? In a small town, 35,000. These are just the very businesses that provide jobs, sponsor the local football clubs, support our schools, and their decline is a warning sign. ASIC's recent figures show 4,242 businesses collapsed in Victoria during the last financial year. The Victorian Chamber of Commerce and Industry said the figures were deeply concerning, but sadly not surprising. The state has never been in a worse situation, socially and economically. And the sad reality is that the Allan Labor government's high taxing and heavily regulated environment causes small businesses to fail in record numbers. This Labor government is nation-leading at driving businesses out of business. Families own businesses. If they were being supported, we wouldn't have businesses closing. This government boasts about their infrastructure investment in health, and that in itself, something we're still waiting for in South West Victoria. We were promised in 2020 a $384 million hospital. Now already, because the budget has been overrun, because the government, the Allan Labor government, can't manage projects, they have blown the budget out, and already they've cut vital services out of the scope of the original project. So the promises they gave us in 2020 have already been not delivered and they haven't even started. So they've cut from the project pathology, biomedicine, medical record facilities, a morgue, kitchens and car parking spaces. So why should the community have to endure that? This is a project that is a once-in-a-lifetime project, and we're going to have a hospital without those facilities up to a standard that is needed to attract staff and to make the hospital able to service the community. That's what the scope was put forward for in the first place, and we're not going to get that delivered. It beggars belief, and I do not understand why that is even slightly acceptable. The Portland Hospital, a very important hospital for an industrial centre. We've got an operating port, an aluminium smelter, so heavy industry. Yet the services from Portland are diminishing before our eyes. We've got the theatres often on bypass. Maternity can not always be offered, maternity services on bypass. We're struggling to have enough anaesthetists, general surgeons. Now, this is a government's responsibility. We can hear the government making excuses about attracting and retaining staff and how difficult it is. Yep, well, that's every business's challenge, but that is the role of government. So what are they doing? No, they're not doing that. And do you know what? I can prove it, because the ophthalmologist that used to serve Portland is still in Mount Gambier, but cannot work in Portland and wants to. Now, how does a blind man get himself to a service in Mount Gambier if he can't drive, there's no public transport, and he has to go interstate to get a service? This is just absurdities. And you would think that a person should be able to get services, but if they can't, you'd think the priority would be the helipad. But this government has even closed down the helipad. Now, we don't know why, because the government told us it was CASA, the Civil Aviation responsible body. We wrote to them, I wrote to them, and sure enough, they said, no, it's got nothing to do with us. The minister refuses to disclose the rationale behind it, but this is life and death situation. So if they're going to cut services, they absolutely should provide the helipad that the community funded through hard work and fundraising, and that Dennis Napthine, my predecessor, worked very hard to get there, and now we don't have it. So if you're 5 hours away from Melbourne, you would think, and your hospital that you've had for many years servicing you can't service you like the way it used to, you would think that would be a no-brainer. And we are talking about life and death. So why isn't the government prioritising this? They don't care about the regions. We actually don't even know why the helipad was closed, and the government won't disclose the reasons why, let alone work on a solution. And the community is owed an answer on that. The backbenchers are clearly puppets for the Premier's doctors, the Premier's spin doctors, and we hear it all the time. The rhetoric I hear about communities doing well, it's all orchestrated and misinformed. You know, the member for Ripon in the paper this morning, misleading her community, writing to VicGrid about getting her community spared from the renewable energy zone. I mean, VicGrid hasn't even been set up. This is her government's policy, her government's action. So, you know, will she be in the chamber to vote, or will she hide? These are the things our communities should be looking for, and we will see on Thursday when that bill has been debated and voted upon. So, you know, this is a government claiming they are helping families, but families are struggling. They're working hard. As someone who's raised a family and run a business, I understand this. Childcare, often an essential part of family operations. The Allan Labor government has let down families. They've let them down terribly. And I'm being spoken to a lot in the last few weeks from women who tell me they've lost confidence in the childcare system. And this is the government's fault, because on the table for the last 3 years, after a review was completed, has been the Ombudsman's recommendations. For 3 years they've sat on the table unresponded to by this government. I cannot believe the government, when they heard the despicable alleged child abuse that has taken place by Joshua Brown in childcare centres, has not acted. What they've done, though, is they've called for a review. That is not an action. A review is not an action when it's a review on a review, because those recommendations sit on the table waiting to be adopted, recommended by the Ombudsman 3 years ago. The government is reckless here. The Liberals introduced yesterday, in a bipartisan way, legislation that had those recommendations in it that the government could have looked at. We could have debated. If they wanted to amend it, we could have done that, but they did nothing. In fact, they voted against it and said they've got a rapid review. A rapid review. It's been 3 years. This is a disgrace. And then we had the government today in question time talk about the money they're spending on roads. This is a government who just continually spins. Our roads are in a shocking state, and if the government is spending millions of them, it's either a shocking waste of money or it's all going into the tunnels in Melbourne. Just this morning, I had my office contacted by the people going down the highway, the Princes Highway in Warrnambool, right through the main thoroughfare of our town. And the potholes, it was described, people were weaving to miss. Now, that is dangerous. One car was actually so badly damaged from the size of these potholes that it had to pull into the business on the side of the highway and leave it there because it was undrivable. I mean, the government is it is delinquent in its responsibilities to our roads. They are crumbling. So if that's responsible governing, if that's helping families, it's not. It's costing families incredibly. And we see businesses like in Portland closing down, Meebus Brothers, the business that would fix our roads. And it's not because they couldn't manage their business, it's because the government kept slamming down barriers in front of them. You know, this government is irresponsible, and our roads show it. Their irresponsibility to our most vulnerable, the children, businesses closing, demonstrate it. Balance for families is not something this government can claim. It can't even engineer it. True balance comes from freedom of choice, not rigid government formulas or one-size-fits-all program, which is what this government use. I stand for a South West Coast that is resilient, free to grow and driven by local energy and initiative, not government constraints and control.
Member